Hey, global leader and expatriate. Welcome to Joyride with Expatriates. If this is your first time here, in this show, we bring every month a different person to talk about their expatriation experiences, how to increase cultural competence, and how to become an effective and productive leader while living abroad. Hi, I'm Tatyana Fittipaldi, and in this channel, we make videos to help global leaders become more effective, more productive, and improve their leadership both in business and life. In today's interview, we have the pleasure to talk with Fezi Mauncho. Fezi Mauncho was born in Kenya of a Kenyan father and a Swazi mother. She is an educator, a musician, and a pastor. She homeschools her daughters and is the co-founder of an arts-based learning space called Kitovu Learning Space. She has lived in several countries, the last two being Canada for 15 years, and now Kenya for the last 9 years. Fezi is married, has 3 daughters, a cat, and 4 dogs, and currently is living in Nairobi, Kenya. Please join me in welcoming Fezi to our show. Fezi, welcome to our show. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be on the show with you.
Thank you. So how about we start by, you telling us where you come from and anything from your background.
Okay, so I am Kenyan by birth, born of a Kenyan father and a Swazi mother. My mother's from Swaziland or Eswatini. And I was born and raised here in Kenya in East Africa until I was 12. And then after that, I lived in Southern Africa in Swaziland for about 8 years or so, and then moved to Canada where I went to university and got married and became a Canadian citizen and had my kids. And, I started my adult life as a young Canadian, young African Canadian. Yeah, so that's a little bit of my background. I actually think probably my professional experience was established or founded in Canada, and I got a very good Canadian foundation before I traveled back here now, and I've been here for the last 9 years or so.
So you're back in Kenya the past 9 years?
Yes, and I live in Nairobi, the capital city.
So Fezi, tell me, so you, as you were a young, a child, you were, you lived something. I'm very curious because I only read it from the books, right? But I'm very curious to read your experience as a kid and maybe even your parents' experiences about the apartheid. So can you tell us a little bit how that was for you and, share some of your experiences?
Okay, I can talk a little bit about it from maybe my mother's perspective, because my mother is from Swaziland. But all the Southern African countries that neighbor South Africa were very, very connected with South Africa. First of all, because most of them would send miners to go and work in the mines in South Africa, in the gold mines, in the diamond mines, and the different mines. And my grandfather and some of our family members worked in the mines in South Africa. And so there's that connection through the males in my family that would have worked in South Africa. But then my mother used to go to school in Lesotho, which is a tiny little country entirely surrounded by South Africa. So to go to school, they'd have to cross the whole country. And so when they were in Swaziland, they were blacks, or they were African, whatever that means. But then when they were in South Africa, they were black people. And so then they would experience segregation. And apartheid means apartness. The apartheid government did not want the races to mix. And so they would ride at the back of the train, and they would be treated, like black people, like second-class citizens, so to speak. Many of the countries as well that surrounded South Africa had bases where the liberation movement would house their freedom fighters. So many of the people who are leaders in South Africa today would have grown up in Swaziland, in Mozambique, and Zimbabwe. And actually, you might know in history that President of Mozambique was shot down by the Apartheid South African government because he was protecting the liberation fighters. So that touches me a little bit just through my education and my schooling, because I went to school with some of the children of the people who are in the liberation movement. But generally, in terms of our life, we were very connected in solidarity. We were very connected because of being a neighbor. So, for example, you could go shopping across the border to like my family. I lived with my uncle for a short amount of time in a border city called Bulembu on the Swazi side, and on the South African side was called Barberton. And instantly, when you cross the border, everything was very different.
How so?
Yeah, you felt the separation, you felt the segregation.
So I was wondering, how you felt when you crossed and you saw that difference. How was that for you? Or for your mom more specifically, right?
My mom used to talk about it, and they used to talk about how degrading it was. They used to talk about how angry it used to make them feel. When I was a teenager, South Africa apartheid was coming to an end, so there was a little bit. It was not as hostile, but it still was very, very tense. It wasn't necessarily the rainbow nation that it is today. Yeah, so I know through their memories, through the songs that they used to sing, and through the stories that they used to tell about the oppression that they felt and the anger that they felt because of what was happening in South Africa. But it would spill over to the surrounding nations, in that the surrounding nations would interact with them, because South Africa was very powerful. Many people would go and work there. Many people were born and raised in South Africa, including my mom as well. She spent her early years in South Africa as well because of her father working there.
And so it's interesting that you're bringing up the messages about your mom. So I have a question about that. Offline, you mentioned to me that your mom, your family, they raised you with songs of freedom, of equality, and she taught you about every person being a spiritual being, everyone is equal, and you see people from their inside, right, and not from their outside. So I was wondering how important that was for you to become the person who you are, and how different it would have been if she raised you with messages of anger and bitterness.
That's a very good question. And I think you asked about even music in earlier on, and yeah, my mom and my dad raised me to be a powerful person. I think it was important, and I still think it is important, to tell the story, to tell our history, so that a generation never repeats the atrocities from the past.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes, but then it's not to bring accusation, and it's not to bring condemnation, because that's not useful. My mom, I actually was thinking about this. There's a song that Miriam Makeba sings, and the name of the song is called Vervoed. Vervoed was one of the presidents of South Africa. And the song says, Mr. Vervoed, be careful, watch out, here comes the black man. Now, imagine the black man was in the place of oppression and supposedly second-class citizenship, but they never forgot who they were. They were warriors, they were business people, they were tradespeople, artists, educators. Did you know that one of the oldest mathematical artifacts in the world comes from Swaziland? Tiny little Swaziland. It's a measuring instrument.
No,
they were astronomers.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And then all over Southern Africa, there are these. They kind of remind me of a little bit of Stonehenge. They're like calendars that are set in stone, and very, very interesting archaeological sites that speak of the fact that we were very highly educated. Maybe not in the Western education system, but we had knowledge systems. So my parents raised me telling me about things like that. My father taught me that the people around where my family came from were artisans. They made tools and utensils and all sorts of things out of metal. But then when the colonialists came to Kenya, they also the British government of the time, the empire, was looking for a place to trade, and so they brought their goods. And when they found that we were working with metal, you know what they would do to prevent people from making metal things? They would cut your hands off. They'll tell you you're not allowed to be an artisan from now on. So they'll cut the hand of the main blacksmith or whoever, so that it as a warning to the other people.
But did they fear the competition?
That didn't make me, made me angry. But then it said to me, oh, look at us. They were thriving civilizations they came and found here. So that taught us that we are powerful, that we can learn, as long as we have access to knowledge, we can transcend anything that has been given to us, anything negative that has been given to us. But he also spoke to me about how powerful we were. And some of those songs transmitted our identity. They taught us who we were as human beings. And one of the things you mentioned about spirituality, my mom and my dad and my people are spiritual people. We are following in the tradition of Christ, and I think Christ belongs to everyone. I don't think Christ is exclusive to a certain person. And there's a mindset of kingdom and kingship that to me is very, very reminiscent of my people. And my father's clan is a clan of kings. So some of the things, when I read the stories, sometimes when I read the stories and I read Jesus's teachings, I see it's about freedom, it's about power, it's about you as a spiritual being connecting in the universe. And I don't see how that is any different from my my African spirituality. Maybe the Jews they saw something that I think is in all humanity, and it just so happens that maybe they captured it in a book, and because of our history, whatever ours has been erased, and it's only passed on orally. And coincidentally, a lot of the Old Testament is very, very similar to my culture, very, very similar to my culture. And so again, we were taught who we were so that we understood the power of who we were, and it will teach us that there's nothing that we cannot do. And I think we'll talk about this offline, about this whole idea of Ubuntu or Utu in Eastern Africa, that says I am because we are. And we were talking about a greeting as we were getting to know each other, and one of the greetings, which is found in the movie Avatar, the blue people, like I'm wearing blue today. That's a coincidence. I forgot about that. And they say, when you encounter somebody, you look at them and you say, I see you. And that means I allow you to look in the windows of my soul and see the essence of who I am. And in Siswati or Zulu, we say, Sawubona. And the other person will respond, Yebo, which means, yes, I see you. Do you see me? And vice versa. And then they have other ways that, it continues. But there's that essence of you are a person and I'm a person. And one of the things we talked about a little bit the last time was the fact that in our Bantu languages, of which I belong, we don't have he, she pronouns and all of that. When whether it's a man or a woman, they are they. And I was talking about spiritually, you are a person. And so when I'm referring to Tati, I'll say, oh, Tati said this or Tati said that. We don't say she said this or she said that or he said this or he said that. The word that we use, the pronoun we use is a they pronoun. And it also tends to be a pronoun of honor as well. Like honor is very, very critical in our culture. We are raised with honor as young people. And so whenever we encounter each other, and for us, it doesn't matter where you come from. What matters is that you are a righteous person. And righteousness has to do with respect, honor, and seeing, allow you to see me, and you can see back into me. So we treat each other like we would want to treat each other. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, no, it does. And, it's giving me the chills because I love this, how inclusive. So you basically what you're saying is that the language, your language already envisioned it in such a way that it creates an environment of inclusion, because you're not segregating genders or you're not segregating people. You're just seeing people for who they are internally in their hearts, and not if they have any issues or any anything in their faces, or if they have one or two arms, that you don't care about that. You care about, as you said, and I love this word, the essence, right? So I love it. I simply love this. I'm very I'm very interested and fascinated. And this is a good segue for our next question. So so you told us that you went to Canada, right? So how was it for you to be a foreigner in Canada? Tell us your expatriation experience. How was that?
I see, I hear. Sorry, I'm so sorry about the internet. Yes. Yeah, so I went to Canada, and I got married. I met my husband there, and I raised my children. And I also went to university in Canada. And Canada is potentially a very inclusive nation. And my experience in Canada was not one of racism or oppression. Of course, when I was there, I met a few ignorant people, just as there are ignorant people all over the world.
Yeah, everywhere.
It is also very interesting, some of the things that are coming out right now in terms of Canada and experience with Native Canadians, which, the whole idea of colonialism and some of the atrocities that are still yet to be accounted for. But in terms of my individual experience, I met beautiful people. I met people who also have the same outlook. Interestingly enough, it was very interesting to connect with Native Canadians as well. And talking to them and engaging with them, we have very, very similar outlooks towards life, and even a very similar spiritual sense, if I can put it that way. But despite that, on paper, Canada is very honoring of all people. Canada is very inclusive. Canada is built on I wouldn't even say multiculturalism. They don't like to say that as well. But they are very intentional in being inclusive. That doesn't mean that it plays out well all across the board. But raising my children was a very interesting idea away from my people. And again, I tried to raise them with the same ethos that I was raised in that we are first, more than anything, we are spiritual people, which means that, yes, we had the privilege of being born African. And I always taught my children that it was a privilege for us to be born African. It's a privilege for us to carry this beautiful brown skin. But it is the skin with which we encounter the world. And our hearts are the spirit with which we encounter the world. And when I remove your skin and you remove my skin, we're not very different. Sometimes people will treat us differently because of the color of our skin, but we are never to forget how powerful we are. And I just had the wonderful blessing of being able to meet people like that in Canada and interact on that level, on a spiritual level, on a powerful level. Equal people. Now, doesn't matter whether you're a man, a woman, age doesn't matter. Very interestingly, there's a beautiful, beautiful lady who she just took me and a friend of mine who ended up becoming my sister-in-law. But she took us on, 2 African girls, and she raised us like her own children. And she happened to be present at the birth of all 3 of my children. When my children, she used to smoke, and she had a very husky voice. And my children would know her voice. And she was Canadian. She was white Canadian, but she loved us, and we loved her. And I can tell you of many, very many interesting individuals like that who mentored me, who taught me, and who introduced me to adult life on Canadian soil as an African. But they honored who I was as an African, and they loved it. And one of the things that they particularly loved about me is my African music, because of my upbringing amongst Africans who were always singing. I was always singing, and I didn't know that was something special about who I was as an African. And African music opened so many doors for me in Canada, and people appreciated that about me. And of course, it's not my music that's not the only part of who I was. It opened doors that allowed people to see other aspects of me that were equally as powerful and transcend color, borders, or anything. They're just me as a human being.
That's fascinating. And, Fezi, you mentioned to me that, you told me something very interesting online, and you didn't mention it, so I wanted to bring it up. You told me when you came back to Kenya, you know, your children asked you, Mom, what it means. You didn't tell me what it means to be Black, and I wanted you to clarify this, and I wanted to you to tell us about this, and about how your family, you know, experienced the repatriation when you went back to your own country.
Yeah. So when I came back home, we came back with my children who had always lived in Canadian society, and they happened to be the only Black kids at school and in many different forums. We lived in Ottawa for a few years, where Ottawa is very cosmopolitan, and Ottawa has people from all over the world. So there they had the experience of, for just a few years, of seeing difference more than in other parts of Canada. But still, we always were the minority. And so when we came back home, and all of a sudden they said, Mom, how come there's so many brown people here? And they're hearing different languages, and they're seeing different experiences. They're interacting with relatives, aunties, and uncles, and they are seeing, it's different to be a woman in Africa. It's different to be a girl in Africa. There's different ways of being. And it was very interesting to see them experience Africa as African children who were born outside. But then, because they are so innocent, they asked beautiful questions about humanity and why do they say that, and why do they speak like that. But they didn't, they were loved, which was key. They were loved and they were welcomed, because Africa is that, you know, if you came home to my country right now, you become my sister because I brought you, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. As long as I bring you, you're fine. So they had that experience, but they were fine until George Floyd's death in 2020. And all of a sudden, there was a conversation about being Black that because they were now older, they had not been able to participate in, and we did not necessarily engage them in from a hostile perspective. So when we were growing up in Canada, I taught them about their Africanness. I taught them about, you know, our history. They understood that, but they just understood that it's a part of who we are. But when they saw the oppression rise up again of being Black, the bitterness and the anger and the frustration, which we all felt, and particularly us people of African descent. And now they're teenage girls, they felt as well. They said, Mom, why did you not teach us what it means to be Black? And I said, but you are very young, and I didn't want you to grow up angry in a context where I couldn't connect you with the rest of our people, because they weren't the rest of our people, so that you could experience our culture and see our culture. It was important for you first to be human. It was important first for you to be spiritual. Because you're human and because you're spiritual, you're powerful. And you can carry the anger, because there's a level where anger is righteous. And then you can do something about it. And you can do something about it so that we maintain the power that we have, so that we can teach future generations differently without passing on bitterness and without passing on hatred. Hatred and bitterness are counterproductive. They don't help us. I said, we need to be educated. We need to be economically powerful. We need to be influential, so that we can change systems, not only systems on our African continent, but even as we build our nations, our African continent, and even our individual countries, and we showcase the beauty, the strength, the power of who we are. We have something to offer the nations of the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we don't need anyone to tell us how powerful we are, and we don't need validation from outsiders. That must come from within ourselves. We have to understand who we are for our own self. But we also have to know that that what we have is beautiful, and what we have is worth sharing. Just the same way that being African really has been, there's a purity about who I am as an African, but there's no such thing as pure, because we are constantly being influenced by everybody. So much has been taken from the African continent to the rest of the world, sometimes by force, but it is still shaping. Even when it's taken by force, it still shapes those countries for good. And we are saying, for the first time, how about if we give it? And there's an exchange that comes back, but it is on an equal plane, not oppressor oppressive, or there's a concept we have here in Africa when we talk about politics and foreign relations and all of that. We call it thieves by pens. We have thieves who steal by the pen here, and thieves who steal by the pen from outside through bilateral agreements that are not equal, and they place us always at a disadvantage. It's very difficult to understand the nuances of how those things work if we are full of anger and hatred. Do you see what I'm saying? So being an educator, being whatever I am, I have to keep love as the foundation of what I do. And love sometimes can be tough. Love can say, no, you can only come this far, and I'm not going to let you into my country, or I'm not letting you into my family, or whatever. You know what I mean? Yeah, it doesn't mean that you're a pushover or a doormat.
No, yes,
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's part of being a being of love is also, telling people what your boundaries are, right? What's
Exactly.
good for you, and what your boundaries are. Because if you didn't care for them, you wouldn't even tell them what the boundaries are, right? You don't care. So you would just leave, or you would just ignore, right? But because you're telling them your boundaries, how much far they can go, it also is an act of love. I do believe that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. I love it. I really love it. So Fezi, tell me something. So you went, so you had the expatriation experience to Canada, and then another expatriation experience, which was the repatriation, right? When you came back to your country. So tell me, maybe in one word, what these experiences teach you?
These experiences teach me, I think the biggest one word is love. Yeah. And love first for me. One of the things that I really loved about being in Canada was I became so fully alive as an African, in a way that, because I was always an African. I had nothing to compare it with, right? I didn't know what that meant. And I was young, I was a child, and I went to Canada just as I was becoming a woman. Just leaving childhood behind, becoming a woman, encountering people in the professional space, in the adult world. And I saw, oh my God, this is what it's beautiful to be me. It's beautiful to be a woman. It's beautiful to be African. And then, so I had to choose, well, how am I going to then be? How am I going to be? Am I going to share that? Or am I going to try to change that and become Canadian, or whatever anybody else wants me to be? Or am I going to retain that and operate from that, and even professionally share from that? You know what I mean? So it really taught, because love means, before you can love anybody else, you have to love yourself. And being with Canadians taught me that. I mean, that tells you the kind of people that I met, who were beautiful and gave me an opportunity and to flourish. And then when I came back home,
and to be yourself, right? To be authentic.
Yes. And I lived in Canada for 15 years. So that means there's something about Canada that was going to rub on me. And honestly, when we came back home, they always used to refer to us as the Canadians, because I think that the essence of that was very, very powerful on the inside of us as well. And I don't think they call us the Canadians anymore, but I think I had that to bring back home. I had my experiences being educated in Canada, living with Canadian neighbors, having friends. And but the beautiful thing I loved about Canada was, again, just people from all over the world. So I wasn't only ever with only white people. I was with Canadian people. I was with Congolese people, other different kinds of Africans for me, Indian friends. And so that allowed me, when I came back home, to find my place. And now I had to know, what does that mean to be Kenyan? I can speak the language, I know the culture, but the work environment was very, very different. How do I navigate that? How do I share with other people? So I ended up starting, I worked in the corporate world for a very short period of time. I found that it didn't fit with me. I think being Canadian maybe had an influence of that, because people do business very, very differently. And one of the things I'll say that is because of some of the struggles, we will be transparent. It can be very difficult to do business in Africa. You have to understand the language, you have to understand the nuances. And it's not necessarily because of culture, although you do have to be educated in the culture, but you also have to know the business language. How do people operate? Kenya is a very cosmopolitan city. It's a very, very international city. There's a lot of companies and non-governmental organizations, big ones like the UN and IMF, and it's been like this for a long time, and Nairobi particularly. So you have to, if you want to come back here and do business or live and work, you have to understand how that works, connect with other people. So that was important. But then I felt, for me, my space was in a little bit of maybe private sector or whatever. None. So we started a learning. We call it a learning space because you can see I'm very artistic. Somebody would say, some people call it a school, but we don't like to call it a school because it's not a formal school in terms of our approach to educating children and teaching them. So ours is very arts based, but doesn't mean we don't do science and math and STEM. We actually are a STEAM center where we do all of those, and the focus is very artsy, and the focus is also very African. So learning about our traditional African instruments, and that if you learn about the traditional African instruments, you'll understand that one particular one called the nyatiti, that is an 8-stringed instrument, and if you can trace that instrument all the way to Egypt, from here all the way to Egypt, all through, as you follow the River Nile, all the people along it play that instrument in one form or another. And we think that that's probably what they talked about. King David might have played in the Bible. We don't know, but we think that that's probably the same. So, and then we have this fiddle that is played all the way from here till China. It's just a very, very similar, instrument. And then we were learning that
it's the 2-chord one. It's 2-chord, right? It's
ours has just one chord.
Oh, one chord.
And you can do so many different things with it. Yeah. So you can learn about history, music, but you learn about history, you learn about math, you learn about physics. Yeah. So that professionally, that's the space I ended up in. And so and working as an educator, being creative, but again, imparting Ubuntu and imparting strength and spirituality. Our education is very African based, not because of anything, because we live in Africa, but we have had children from all over the world be educated by us. And it is the most beautiful thing to see children of all colors playing we call them ohangla drums or bull drums, and they're beating them and they're singing our songs, and it's absolutely fantastic. And I always wonder, when they go to Brazil or they go to wherever they go, China, what are they going to say about the encounter they had with us? And more importantly, they're going to be singing our songs. And I love that.
Yes, absolutely. It's fascinating, because I so believe in educating, people from all over the world. Because I think it creates exposure for people. They are exposed to new things, to different things, and when we are exposed to different things and meet new people, meet all types of people, we become less fearful, right? And when we become less fearful, we become less prejudiced, right? So it's I think it's so important. That's incredible. What you're doing is great. It's awesome. I love it.
I love what you say about being less fearful. That is so important. That and you remind me of, we were doing a show once at outside an outdoor show. It was a flea market, and there was people from all over the world, and we were singing the Korean song. It's called Arirang. It's very famous, and so the kids were just singing, and it was a beautiful sunny day. And somebody walked by us, an Asian man, and he stopped and he looked at us, and he just came alive. We didn't get to talk to him, but we think he might have been Korean. And in Nairobi, he heard a song from his home country. And we felt a beautiful connection with him. And then he carried on, and he was shopping and doing other things, and we kept singing. And it was a beautiful, beautiful experience. So I love what you're saying about, I don't think he was fearful, but I think it transcended fear. It brought an intimacy and a connection, and he's so into us, and we so
you feel included, right? You feel like part of, because right, I think that's fabulous. Yeah. And Fezi, you were mentioning about the songs and about how to do business in Kenya and all these elements. And as I was telling you on offline, we communicate differently. And sometimes we use gestures thinking that we are communicating something, and we are not, right? And I told you offline how sometimes this can be okay in certain countries, but in other countries, it can mean a whole different thing, right? So I was wondering if you can remind a gesture in your country, any gesture, and what does it mean? So for example, in Brazil, we have a gesture that we trace back to Italian, and that means that something is delicious. We do something like this, mwah, mwah. It's mwah, delicious. So what gesture you can think of that is very specific in Kenya?
Well, there's several, and I'm trying to think of just one gesture, and that couldn't come to my mind. And it's very interesting that all the gestures I'm thinking of involve two people. So when you shake somebody's hand, it is a mark of respect to shake their hands with two hands. You hold both hands, or you hold one hand and you put the other hand right here like this, and then you shake the other person's hand. And it's almost equivalent to when the Japanese meet each other and they bow down. And I could, for the life of me, I can't think of a gesture that is one-handed, that is not obscene. That's the one I can think of. Like when how we shake hands, we shake with two hands. It's almost like an embrace. Like I hug, I bring you in, and I greet you with both hands.
And is this just for friends,
expression in our language
if you meet a stranger that is also so, or
anyone you meet.
Anyone. Oh, interesting. Because in Brazil we can use both hands too, but this is usually done when we already know someone, when we have intimacy with that person. So it's interesting to learn that in Kenya that can happen even with strangers.
Yeah, I think our culture is very welcoming and very embracing, and even with a stranger, we will give you the benefit of the doubt. And one of the ways that one expression we have is, I receive you with two hands. And I suppose maybe that's why we will shake your hands with two hands. So it's an outward expression of what we are on the inside.
That's so interesting. That's really interesting. So how about we go to our card? Are you ready for the card? So Fezi, read the card, read it out loud, and then you can say anything that comes to your mind. On the top and then
I decide how to attribute my worth and nobody else. I'm in control of my life. I'm worthy, and my self-worth comes from within.
So before you start, let me tell you,
know my response, correct?
Yes. So you can think about anything, right? But I was thinking, while you were talking today, you mentioned this already in the show, how important worth from within is, right? And I was like, oh my God,
yeah.
I can't imagine that I selected this card, because I selected this, way before, right? So
I think it's very interesting.
I cannot believe this.
I think of something very powerful. I think about, I mean, I don't want to sound cliche, but I do think about Africa. And there's an expression we have for ourselves as African, and we call ourselves the sons of the soil, or the people of the soil. And the soil is very important here because we are an agricultural people. But then I also think it's also the color of our skin. There's so many different shades of the soil. And it speaks of our worth in that we are connected to it, we come from it, but it's also very, it's the essence, the most basic building block. You can build homes, you can do all sorts of things, you can reproduce life from the soil. And so sometimes what doesn't seem worthy, or what can be overlooked actually, is what sustains and carries life and nurtures life. And so when you tell me worth, I think about my African people, I think about our African soil, I think about the essence of what it means to be African. And it's also what we share with the world. Literally, you know, people come and take minerals and all sorts of things from here. We export crops and stuff. It's very expensive. And expensive is not even a good word. Worth is a good word.
So,
okay.
So this is about it. These are the questions that I had prepared for you for today. I just wanted to thank you so much for being here, for sharing your stories, for sharing your experiences. They're very, very valuable, and I'm sure that they're going to be valuable to other people, for other people to also learn about your experiences. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, and again, just having just a very, very, very conversation just full of life. And I wish what you're doing is so important. I wish there'd be more conversations like this in the professional world. I know we do talk about our jobs and our experiences and all these things, but maybe we sometimes just talk about our soul and our humanity,
and
because
who
that's
we
what
are,
drives
right?
who we are. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you're brilliant, and I love that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Hey, I want to tell you one more thing. You are a global leader. The question is, do you have all the skills that you need to succeed? I'd love to help. I save my very best tips for my subscribers. Subscribe for free at coachingexpatriates.com. I know your inbox is sacred, so I promise I will send you emails that you will love. Whoa, that was fascinating. I really think these kinds of conversations are super important to raise awareness and increase our cultural competence. If you like the show today, please share it with a friend and subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to hit the bell so that you can be notified when we have new things. Thank you so much for watching.